Ambassador Tova had served the Galactic Accord for 200 years. She had seen wars. She had seen peace. She had watched empires rise and fall like waves on a cosmic shore. But she had never felt fear like this. Not until the Drekari came. The Drekar swarm moved through the galaxy like a disease. They did not negotiate. They did not take prisoners. They consumed everything in their path planets, stations, entire species. 17 civilizations had already been erased from existence. The Accord's combined fleet, the greatest military force in known space, had been shattered in a single battle. Now Tova sat alone in her small diplomatic vessel, staring at coordinates that every star chart in the galaxy was marked with the same warning: do not approach. Sector 7G, the Forbidden Zone. The place where, according to ancient records, a species of impossible violence had once existed. Most scholars believed they had destroyed themselves long ago. Others said they had never existed at all, just stories invented to scare young cadets into obedience. The Villani called them the Ashwalkers. Legend said they came from a death world, a planet so hostile that it killed most creatures before they could evolve. The survivors were monsters who ate the flesh of other animals, drank poison for pleasure, fought wars against each other for reasons no rational species could understand. Tova did not believe in legends, but the Accord Council was desperate. They had voted unanimously to send her here to the edge of known space, to find out if the myths were real. Her ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel, and Tova's heart stopped. The sector was not empty. It was not full of ruins or ancient wreckage. Instead, she saw lights, thousands of them. Space stations orbited massive planets. Ships moved between worlds in organized patterns. Communication signals filled every frequency. The Ashwalkers were not dead. They were thriving. Before Tova could even send a greeting, a voice crackled through her communication system. It spoke in perfect Villani, though with a strange accent that her translator struggled to process. Ambassador Tova, of the Villani Collective, we have been expecting you. Please follow the beacon to Station Inchin. Do not deviate from the assigned path. Tova's hands trembled as she guided her ship forward. How did they know her name? How did they speak her language? The questions multiplied in her mind, but she had no answers. Station Inchin was enormous, a massive structure of metal and glass that seemed designed for function rather than beauty. Tova docked her ship and stepped out into a corridor where the air felt heavier than she was used to. The gravity here was stronger, much stronger. A group of figures waited for her. They stood on two legs, like Villani, but shorter and broader. Their skin came in various shades of brown and tan. Their eyes were small, but intensely focused. They wore simple gray uniforms with symbols Tova did not recognize. At the front stood a woman with dark hair cut short and practical. Her face was calm, almost peaceful, but her hands were covered in small scars. When she spoke, her voice was quiet but carried weight. I am Captain Park Jisoo. Welcome to Human Space Ambassador. Human. So that was what they called themselves. Tova bowed in the Villani style of greeting. Captain Park, I come on behalf of the Galactic Accord. We face a threat that the Drekari swarm. Jisoo interrupted. We know. We have been watching your war for some time. Tova felt a chill run through her. You have been watching? Then why did you not help? Gaisu's expression did not change, but something flickered in her eyes. 3,000 years ago, our ancestors sent signals into the galaxy. They wanted to make contact, to join the community of intelligent species. Do you know what response they received? Tova was silent. She knew the history. The ancient Accord had classified the human homeworld as a Category 5 death world. The inhabitants were deemed too dangerous, too unstable to be allowed into galactic society. The decision was made to quarantine the entire sector and pretend they did not exist. Silence. Jisoo continued. And then, when your ancestors realized we had survived and were building ships of our own, they established the Forbidden Zone. They made us ghosts, monsters in children's stories. For 3 millennia, the galaxy pretended we were not real. I am sorry, Tova said. I truly am. But Captain, my people are dying. The Sylvari are dying. The Rothani, the Kalush, all of them, the swarm, is consuming everything. We have nowhere else to turn. Gisu studied the ambassador for a long moment. Behind her, the other humans remained perfectly still, watching with those small, intense eyes. My government has already made its decision, Gisu said finally. We will help you. Tova felt relief flood through her body. Thank you. Thank you, Captain. The Accord will be forever grateful. I am not finished. Gaisu's voice sharpened. We will help, but there are conditions. First, you will not command our forces. Human soldiers answer to human officers. Second, you will watch everything we do. Every battle, every strategy, every sacrifice. You will witness what we are capable of. Why? Tova asked. Gisu smiled, but it was not a warm expression. It was the smile of someone who had waited a very long time for this moment. Because when this war is over, you will never forget us again. You will never pretend we are myths. You will look at your children and your grandchildren, and you will tell them the truth that when the galaxy burned, it was humans who walked into the fire. Tova nodded slowly. She did not fully understand these creatures yet. Their pride, their anger, strange intensity was unlike anything she had encountered in 2 centuries of diplomacy. But as she watched, Captain Park Jisu turn and walk deeper into the station. Followed by her silent soldiers, Tova felt something she had not felt since the war began. Hope. The Ashwalkers were real, and they were coming. The rally point was a space station at the edge of Accord territory. Far from the advancing swarm, here the surviving fleets of 12 species had gathered to make their last stand. Elegant Villani cruisers floated beside the crystalline vessels of the Sylvar, Rothani warships built for speed and grace. Held formation with the heavy carriers of the Kelesh, then the humans, arrived. Commander Reth of the Sylvari was the first to see them on the long-range sensors. He called the other fleet commanders to the observation deck. Together they watched in stunned silence as the human fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel. The ships were ugly. There was no other word for it. There were boxes of dark metal, covered in weapons that jutted out at sharp angles. Their hulls were scarred and dented, marked with damage from battles that had clearly never been fully repaired. Instead of fixing the holes, the humans had simply welded more armor on top. Those cannot be warships, said Admiral Veth of the Rothani. They look like cargo containers with guns attached. But Commander Reth noticed something else. The human ships moved with perfect coordination, sliding into formation with mechanical precision. And on the largest vessel, painted in white letters against the black hole, was a name, Unyielding Soul. Lieutenant Kong Doan was assigned to brief the alien commanders on human military doctrine. He was young by human standards, only 28 years old, but he had already served in 3 campaigns against pirates and rebels in human space. He stood before the gathered admirals and spoke clearly. Our fleet consists of 47 combat vessels, ranging from destroyers to battleships. We also have 12 support ships carrying ground forces, medical teams, and engineering crews. Total personnel, approximately 15,000. Admiral Veth made a sound of disbelief. 15,000? Against a swarm that numbers in the billions? Quality over quantity, Doan replied calmly. 1 human soldier is worth 100 Dreckery drones. The Sylvari commander leaned forward. Lieutenant, I mean no offense, but your species has no combat record in galactic warfare. How can you make such claims? Doan smiled slightly. Because we have been fighting wars since before we discovered fire. War is in our blood. It is in our history, our culture, our very nature. The Dreckery consume worlds. Humans have been consuming each other for 100,000 years. They are amateurs compared to us. The alien commanders exchanged uncertain glances. They did not know if this young human was arrogant or insane. Perhaps both. 3 days later, the Drekkar attacked Malthion Station. Malthion was a mining outpost, home to 6,000 Kelesh workers. The swarm hit it without warning, a wave of bioships that blackened the stars. Carrying millions of warrior drones ready to consume everything organic, the Accord fleet responded immediately. But the Sylvari commander ordered a defensive formation. Standard doctrine was called for holding position and wearing down the enemy with long-range fire. The humans did not follow standard
doctrine.
Sergeant Yunhana stood in the drop bay of the assault ship Thunderbolt. Surrounded by 40 soldiers in heavy combat armor, their weapons were loaded. Their faces were calm. Outside, the Drekari swarm was so thick that the stars had disappeared. "Listen up," Hannah said, her voice steady. "The bugs have taken the station's outer ring. 6,000 civilians are trapped in the intersections. Accord command says to hold position and wait for reinforcements." She paused, looking at each of her soldiers in turn. "We are not going to do that. We are going to punch through their lines, secure the civilians, and hold until evacuation is complete." Questions. Private O.G. Hoon, the youngest member of the squad, raised his hand. "Sergeant, the tactical computer says our survival probability is 11%. Lod laughed. "The tactical computer has never met Korean infantry. We do not calculate probability. We calculate spite. Now get ready." The Thunderbolt launched from the unyielding Sol and dove straight into the heart of the swarm. Drekari interceptors swarmed around it, tearing at its hull with claws and acid. The pilot, a woman named Bei Yuri, flew through the chaos like she was dancing, spinning and rolling to avoid the worst of the attacks. 30 seconds to drop zone," Yuri announced. "Hull integrity at 60%. Make it count, Sergeant." The drop bay doors opened, and Hannah's squad jumped. They fell through space in armored suits, firing their weapons as they descended toward the station. Drekari drones rushed to meet them, but the humans cut through them like knives through water. Hannah felt the familiar rhythm of combat aim. Fire, move, repeat. Her rifle grew hot in her hands. Blood-red human blood and green Drekari. Fluid sprayed across her visor. They hit the station's hull and burned through with cutting torches. Inside, the corridors were crawling with drones. The fighting was close and brutal. Hannah lost 3 soldiers in the first minute. Kim Byung-han, torn apart by a warrior drone. Choi Yuna, pulled into a ventilation shaft. Han Min-jae, who threw himself onto a cluster of eggs to detonate them with his own grenades. But the humans did not stop. They did not retreat. 2 hours later, Hannah's squad reached the civilian shelters. The Kelish inside stared at them with wide eyes, unable to believe what they were seeing. These strange creatures, covered in blood and wounds, fought through an entire swarm to save them. Hannah opened her visor so they could see her face. She was smiling, though exhaustion lined every feature. "Evacuation ships are on their way," she said. "You are safe now." Across the station, similar scenes played out. Human squads pushed forward where other species would have retreated. They held positions that tactical computers said were impossible to hold. They died. Yes, many of them died, but they died moving forward. Always forward. When the last civilian was evacuated and the station was secure, Hannah sent her final transmission to Fleet Command. Altheon Station secured. Enemy forces eliminated. Awaiting further orders. On the observation deck of the Sylvari flagship, Commander Reth watched the battle data scroll across his screen. He had seen many things in his long life, but nothing like this. "What are they?" he whispered. Beside him, Lieutenant Kong Don stood with his hands clasped behind his back, watching the distant station with quiet pride. "We are human," he said simply, "and we are just getting started." The Drekari Overmind had existed for 10 million years. It had consumed 1,000 worlds and absorbed countless species into its collective consciousness. It was ancient, patient, and utterly without mercy. For the first time in its existence, it felt something new. Something cold that spread through its neural network like a poison. The human word for this feeling was fear. These new enemies were wrong. They did not behave like prey. Every other species the swarm had encountered followed the same pattern: initial resistance, gradual retreat, eventual collapse. They always broke. They always ran. They always died begging for mercy. The humans did neither. At the Battle of Varen's moon, A single human destroyer held off 12 Drekari bioships for 6 hours. When the ship finally died, its captain, a man named Song Hyun-woo, aimed it directly into the largest enemy vessel, destroying both. His last transmission was a single word that the Overmind's translators could not process. Goodbye. At the siege of Keleth Prime, human ground forces refused to evacuate even when ordered. They held the defensive line for 9 days without sleep, without reinforcement, without hope. When relief finally arrived, they found the humans still fighting, standing on piles of Drekari corpses so high they reached the second floor of the buildings. The Overmind did not understand. These creatures were small. They were soft. They had no natural armor, no claws, no venom. Their senses were weak, their lifespans short. By every measure, they should have been among the easiest prey in the galaxy, and yet they kept winning. Dr. Beek Mina was not a soldier. She was a xenobiologist, a scientist who studied alien life forms. But the human military had embedded her with the fleet because they needed someone who could explain things to their new allies. The Accord species had many questions, and most of them came down to a single word. Why? Why did humans fight so hard? Why did they sacrifice themselves so willingly? Why did they refuse to surrender even when logic demanded it? Mina sat in the medical bay of the unyielding soul, sharing a meal with a Vellani doctor named Soren. The alien watched with fascinated horror as Mina bit into a piece of dried meat. "You are eating muscle tissue," Soren said. "From a dead animal. It's called beef jerky," Mina replied. "Want some?" Soren's tentacles curled in what Mina had learned to recognize as disgust. "No, thank you," Mina chewed thoughtfully. "You want to know why we are the way we are? It is simple. Our homeworld tried to kill us. Every single day for 100,000 years, the Earth tried to end our species. How so? Ice ages that froze entire continents. Plagues that killed half the population. Predators with claws and teeth designed to tear us apart. Other humans who wanted what we had." Mina swallowed and reached for another piece of jerky. "We did not survive because we were the strongest. We survived because we were too stubborn to die. Evolution did not make us powerful. It made us persistent." Soren considered this. But surely, after reaching space, after building civilization, that survival instinct would fade? Mina laughed, though there was little humor in it. "Doctor, do you know what humans were doing 60 years before we invented the technology to reach other stars? We were fighting a war that killed 80 million of our own kind. 80 million in just 6 years. We never stopped being what we are. We just got better at pointing it outward instead of inward." Private First Class Shin Tai-woo had earned a strange reputation among the alien soldiers. They called him the one who smiles. Tai-woo was not a particularly impressive soldier by human standards. He was average height, average build, with a round face that made him look younger than his 26 years. But he had a gift that set him apart. He genuinely liked people. All people. Even aliens who looked at humans with fear and confusion. In the crowded barracks of the Joint Command Station, Awu shared his rations with terrified Silveri conscripts. He taught them human card games. He showed them pictures of his daughter, a 3-year-old girl named Sujin, who had her mother's eyes and her father's smile. "She is beautiful," a young Silvari named Ven said, studying the photograph. "Do you miss her?" "Every second," Tai-woo admitted. "But that is why I am here. So she can grow up in a galaxy where the swarm does not exist." When the Drekari breached the command station's hull 2 days later, Tai-woo's squad was among the first responders. The fighting was desperate close-quarters combat in narrow corridors, with no room for tactics or strategy. Just violence. Tai-woo and 3 Silvari soldiers found themselves cut off from the main force, trapped in a storage bay with Drekari warriors pouring through the walls. The door behind them led to a civilian shelter, where hundreds of wounded were being treated. "We need to seal that door," Tai-woo said. "If they get through, everyone in the shelter dies." Ben looked at him with wide, frightened eyes. "But if we seal it from this side, we will be trapped with them." "Yes." Tai-woo checked his rifle's ammunition count. 20 rounds left. "Get the others and go. I will hold them as long as I can." "I cannot leave you, Ven." Taiwu put a hand on the young alien's shoulder. His smile was still there, but now it carried something heavier a weight that Ven did not fully understand. I need you to do something for me. When this is over, find a way to contact Earth. Find my wife, Park Yoonji, and my daughter Sujin. Tell them I was brave, okay? Tell them I did not run. Before Ven could respond, Taiwu pushed him through the door and sealed it. Behind him, the Sylvari watched through the small window as the human turned to face the oncoming horde. He did not scream. He did not cry. He simply raised his rifle and began to fire. Walking forward into the mass of enemies like a man taking a stroll through a garden, the last thing Ven saw was Taiwu's face. Still smiling as the Drekari swallowed him whole, the door held. The civilians survived, and in the years that followed, the Sylvari who had fought beside Shin Taiwu spoke his name with a reverence usually reserved for ancient heroes. He was the one who smiled. He was the one who stayed behind. He was human, and they would never forget him. The hollow sun was dying. Once a brilliant yellow star, it had been drained by the Drecario over centuries. Its energy siphoned to fuel the Overmind's expansion across the galaxy. Now it flickered like a candle in the wind, casting strange shadows across the massive swarm that orbited it. This was where the Drekari had gathered their remaining forces. Every bioship, every warrior drone, every spawning vessel in the galaxy had been called back to this single point. The Overmind understood that this was the final battle. If the humans and their allies could be destroyed here, nothing would stop the swarm from consuming everything. The combined fleet of the Galactic Accord arrived 3 days later. Villani cruisers, Sylvari destroyers, Rathani carriers, and at the center of the formation, the scarred and battered ships of the human navy. 47 vessels had left human space. Only 31 remained. Admiral Cho Yuna stood on the bridge of the Unyielding Soul, studying the tactical display. The holographic projection showed the hollow sun surrounded by a cloud of red dots, so thick it looked like a solid sphere. Each represented a Drekari vessel. There were millions of them. Admiral, her tactical officer said, his voice carefully neutral, "The computer has finished calculating our probability of victory." And 0%, ma'am. The swarm outnumbers us approximately 1,000,000 to 1. The computer recommends immediate retreat to preserve our remaining forces. Yuna was silent for a long moment. She was not a young woman. Her hair had gone gray years ago, and lines of stress and responsibility marked her face. She had been fighting since she was 18 years old, first against human enemies, then against pirates and rebels. And now against an alien horror that threatened all life in the galaxy. She thought about her husband, who had died in the first battle against the swarm. She thought about her son, who served on one of the destroyers in her fleet. She thought about all the soldiers who had followed her into battle after battle, trusting her to lead them home. Then she smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who had made peace with death long ago. "Probability is for people who have already decided to lose," she said. "Humans do not do probability. We do spite. All ships, prepare for attack," alien commanders protested. Commander Reth of the Sylvari begged for reason. Admiral Veth of the Rathani demanded an explanation. Ambassador Tova, watching from her observation post, felt her heart sink as she realized what was about to happen. But the human ships did not wait for permission. They accelerated toward the swarm in perfect formation, their weapons powering up, their crews preparing for the end. The battle that followed would be remembered for 1,000 years. The Drekari met them with overwhelming force. Bioships crashed into the Allied fleet like waves against a shore. Acid sprayed across hulls. Claws tore through armor. Ships exploded in brilliant flowers of light. Human and alien alike, dying by the thousands. But the humans did not stop, Captain. Quan Juye of the destroyer Busan found her ship surrounded by 6 enemy vessels. Her weapons offline, her engines failing. Instead of surrendering, she ordered all remaining power to the engines and rammed the largest bioship at full speed. The explosion took out 3 others. Lieutenant Commander Park Sung-ho, ejected from his dying fighter and floated through space toward a Dreckery command vessel. He carried a single antimatter charge strapped to his chest. When he reached the vessel's hull, he detonated it manually. His body was never found. Engineering Chief Moon Gi-won sealed herself in the reactor room of her battleship when containment failed. She held the reaction stable with manual overrides for 11 minutes, long enough for the rest of the crew to evacuate before the explosion consumed her. These were not isolated incidents. Across the battlefield, humans made choices that the alien observers could not comprehend. They sacrificed themselves not out of despair, but out of calculation. Every human death took 10, 50, 100 Dreckery with it, and slowly, impossibly, the swarm began to thin. Corporal An Jeong was a combat medic assigned to the battleship Gwangju. When a Dreckery boarding party breached the hull and flooded the medical bay with acid, she grabbed 4 wounded soldiers and dragged them into a sealed cargo container. For 3 days, she kept them alive using nothing but emergency supplies, her own blood for transfusions, and what she later described as a lot of swearing. When rescue teams finally cut through the container's walls, they found Jeong standing guard at the entrance, a surgical laser in one hand and a fire extinguisher in the other. Behind her, all 4 soldiers were still breathing. "Took you long enough," she said, and then collapsed. The final blow came from Admiral Cho Yuna herself. The unyielding soul, engines failing, hull breached in a dozen places, made one last charge toward the center of the swarm. The Overmind waited there, a massive biological construct that served as the brain of the entire species. "All hands," Yuna announced over the intercom, her voice calm and clear. "This is the Admiral. It has been an honor to serve with you. Those who wish to evacuate may do so. Those who wish to stay, I will see you on the other side." No one left. The unyielding soul struck the Overmind at full speed. The impact was visible from every ship in the System A. Flash of light so bright it momentarily outshone the dying star. The Dreckery swarm went silent. Across the battlefield, millions of drones froze in place. Bioships drifted without direction. The neural network that connected them had been severed in its final moment. The Overmind sent out a psychic broadcast that reached every species in the galaxy. It was not a scream of pain or a cry of defeat. It was a question filled with something that might have been wonder. "What are you?" The answer echoed across the void, spoken by 10,000 human voices in unison, broadcast by every surviving ship in the fleet. "We are human, and we are your end." The hollow sun flickered once more, and the swarm died with it. The war was over. The Dreckery swarm, which had terrorized the galaxy for 10,000 years, was gone. Their bioships rotted in the void around the hollow sun. Their warrior drones lay dead on 100 worlds. The Overmind, the ancient intelligence that had driven them across the stars, had been silenced forever, but the cost had been enormous. Of the 31 human ships that had entered the Battle of the Hollow Sun, only 9 survived. 7,000 human soldiers had died in the final assault alone. Across the entire war, humanity had lost nearly half of its military forces, men and women, who had volunteered to fight for species that had ignored them for 3,000 years. Galactic Accord did not know how to process what had happened. Their own losses were significant, but they had expected that. What they had not expected was the way the humans had fought. The sacrifices they had made. The sheer, stubborn refusal to accept defeat, even when every logical analysis said defeat was certain. "Ambassador." Tova returned to Villani Prime with her report. She stood before the Council of Elders, the highest governing body of her people, and told them everything she had witnessed. When she finished, the chamber was silent. "You were saying," the eldest counselor finally spoke, "that these creatures, these humans, saved our civilization out of pure generosity? That they expected nothing in return?" "That is not entirely accurate," Tova replied. "I spoke with their general, a man named Lee Sun-woo. I asked him why they sacrificed so much for species that had rejected them. His answer was simple." She paused, remembering the general's face. He had been tired, his uniform stained with blood that was not his own. His eyes carrying a weight that seemed too heavy for any single being, said, "Because you needed help. That is enough," the counselors murmured among themselves. Such thinking was foreign to them. The Villani conducted their affairs based on careful calculation of benefit and cost. The idea of sacrifice without expectation of reward was difficult to comprehend, but it was true. The humans had asked for nothing but two things. First, that the Forbidden Zone be abolished, allowing them to travel freely in galactic space. Second, that the galaxy remember what they had done. Both requests were granted unanimously on Villani Prime. A monument was erected in the capital city. It depicted a human soldier, a young woman with short hair and a determined prescient, carrying a wounded Silveri on her back. The statue was made of the same crystal used to honor Villani heroes. But it was larger than any monument in the city's history. Ambassador Tova personally wrote the inscription at its base. It came from a world of fire and ice. They drank poison, ate death, and loved with a ferocity we could not comprehend. We called them myths. They called themselves human. We call them saviors. Similar monuments appeared on worlds across the galaxy. The Silveri named a constellation after Shintayu, the smiling soldier who had died to save their wounded. The Rothani composed epic songs about Admiral Cho Yuna, who had rammed her ship into the heart of darkness. The Kelish taught their children about Sergeant Yunhana, who had led the charge at Malthion Station. The humans became legends. But not the kind of legends they had been before. No longer were they the Ashwalkers, the terrifying monsters of ancient stories. Now they were protectors, guardians, the species that had emerged from quarantine not to conquer, but to save. 3 years after the war ended, Park Jisoo retired from military service. She had been promoted twice, decorated 7 times, and offered command of the entire human fleet. She refused it all. She was tired, she said. She had done enough. She returned to Earth, to a small house in the countryside of what had once been called Korea. She planted a garden. She learned to cook meals that did not come from military ration packs. She watched the stars at night and sometimes thought about the friends she had lost. One afternoon, grandchildren came to visit. They were young, the oldest was only 7, and they knew their grandmother had been a soldier. But they did not understand what that meant, grandmother, the oldest one asked. Sitting on Gisu's lap, were you in the war? Yes, little one. Were you scared? Jisoo looked at the child's face, so innocent, so untouched by the horrors she had witnessed. She thought about the battles she had fought, the friends who had died beside her, the nights when she had lain awake, certain that she would not survive the next day. Yes, she said finally. I was scared every single day. Then why did you go? It was such a simple question. Children always asked the questions that adults were afraid to voice. Jisoo smiled and pulled her grandchild closer, because being brave does not mean you are not scared. It means you go anyway. It means you do what needs to be done, even when you are afraid, even when you think you cannot, because some things are worth being scared for. The child did not fully understand. That was fine. Understanding would come later with time and experience. For now, it was enough that she had asked, far away, on a space station orbiting a world that had once been enslaved by the Drekri. A young Silvari child asked his father about the statue in the central plaza. It showed a human, a soldier with kind eyes and a gentle smile, reaching out a hand toward the stars. Who is that, father? That is a human, the father replied. A long time ago, when our grandparents were young, terrible monsters came to destroy us. We thought we were going to die. But then the humans came. They fought the monsters and saved us all. Were they strong? The father thought about this. He had read the histories. He had seen the recordings. He knew that humans were not particularly strong, not compared to other species. Their bodies were soft. Their senses were limited. By all measures, they should have been among the weakest creatures in the galaxy. No, he said slowly. They were not strong. They were something better. They were stubborn. They refused to give up, no matter what. And when we needed them most, they came to help us, even though we had never done anything for them. The child looked up at the statue with new eyes. They sound like heroes. They are heroes. They are human, and we will never forget them. The legend of the Ashwalkers had ended. The legend of humanity had begun. In the years that followed, human ships traveled freely through galactic space. Human traders opened markets on 100 worlds. Human scientists collaborated with alien researchers. Human artists shared their culture with species that had never heard of music or poetry, with a strange concept called laughter. The galaxy was changed, not by conquest, but by presence. The humans had proven that the myths were wrong. They were not monsters. They were not mindless killers. They were simply people strange, stubborn, impossible people who drank poison, ate flesh, and loved with a ferocity that shook the foundations of the universe. And when anyone asked why they had sacrificed so much, why they had fought so hard, why they had walked into fire for strangers who had rejected them, the answer was always the same: because you needed help. That is enough. That is human. That is who we are.